Smelting, as defined by the businessdictionary.com, is a metal extraction process in which ore, usually mixed with purifying and or heat-generating substances, such as limestone and coke, well, it's heated at high temperatures in an enclosed furnace. After a reduction reaction, lighter ore components, impurities called slag or tailing, it rises to the top where it floats on the molten metal so that it can be removed. It's really a cool process. Actually, it's really hot. The purpose of purifying metals is to ensure their rigidity and integrity so that when used in construction projects, let's say, there is stability, safety, and longevity. Iron, for perspective, melts at 2,800.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Whew, that's hot. This process is the derivative of that pop culture uses, or from which we find the phrases like fire tested, or even the idea of being proven by fire. Evidently, the heat must be extreme to remove all the contaminants and pollutants. This evening, we continue our path through the ordinary days after Pentecost, 15 now Sundays wearing green. I'm looking forward to Advent. And our focus remains the plight of everyday Christian living. Our topic, fittingly, on this eve of Labor Day is works-based faith, or the age-old debate of works versus faith. It is Peter versus Paul. I wonder what Mary thought. Get it? Peter, Paul, Mary. That's pretty good. Actually, it's not good at all. Our epistle reading is from James, and he would have most probably been in the Peter camp. He was the equivalent of the first pastor of the church in Jerusalem and the stepbrother of Jesus. Probably a little clout there, I'm just saying. The position of said camp would have been that works, that is, your labor in the kingdom, were essential, not just to the functionality of the organization, but even more so as an indication somehow of your faith. Your toil was evidence or proof of your salvation, if not in some means salvific all to itself. The influence for the stance is obviously Torah, the law, and the legalism that was integral to Judaism. Furthermore, the first Christian church was predominantly comprised of a bunch of Jews. And remember, the Jewish law was the way to salvation. It was the rule book. Follow it and you will have life. Ignore it and not so much. So moralism was ingrained into the Jews. If that's the case, then actions-based or works-based religion, that seemed natural to them. The tension arose when Paul suggested another way. Now note, Paul was a good Jew. He never says that Torah is invalid. Just that a different pathway had opened, a new way, especially if you were a non-Jew. This new way was less regulatory and more spiritual. And the we've never done it that way before circuit was up in arms. Now, this works-oriented posture has worked its way into Christian thinking, mainstream thinking as well. I have in my office an over 1,000-page book, Roman Catholic Catechism. 1,000 pages. Try to read that at night. It's really good to remedy any kind of sleep issues that you're having. You can see just by the sheer sake that is so, It's so integral and so complex and so thick. That alone suggests that this work-based idea has crept in. Now, I grew up Southern Baptist, evangelical Southern Baptist, and we would have never said that works would, somehow earn you salvation. It was a product of faith and grace, solo fide, solo gratia. Not that anyone in the Southern Baptist Church spoke any Italian back in Center Point, Alabama. Yet the inference of the moralism-heavy instruction concerning our ethics, it was this heavy, heavy Christian education about how you're supposed to live and what you're not supposed to do and what you are supposed to do. Well, the inference there was that even though works wouldn't save you somehow, they were an indication that you had been saved. My grandmother would have said, you can't squeeze oranges and get lemonade. Anyway, works did matter, especially morality, and of course, evangelizing others. It is interesting that the works Jesus emphasized, and we heard it again when Alan was reading earlier, James emphasizes this as well. The works that was emphasized by Jesus concerning the underprivileged, that wasn't emphasized. Advocative efforts for those that Jesus defined as the least among us, it wasn't pushed, unless we were going to try to save them. Christ's teachings are very seldom a list of do's and don'ts. Christianity by Christ is not moralism. When Christ did offer instruction, it was often counterintuitive to the standard practices. So Christ employs allegory to try to convey those messages. It would have been very abrasive to hear. Turn the other cheek, meek inherit the earth. That's not the way we've always done it, Jesus. So Christ told these parables to try to get the message across. In today's gospel lesson, he just full out rebukes the religious leaders of the day as being empty or void of substance. They're following rules just for the sake of rule following. He said that their obedience was with their lips, but not in their heart. It reminds me of the general thanksgiving that's found in our daily office. Morning prayer, evening prayer, in your Book of Common Prayer. Not only with our lips, but in our lives. Well, that seems like a pretty hard stance that Jesus is taking. Yet, the Gospels cite elsewhere 6 different times that Jesus admonishes us, if we have ears, let us hear. The allusion is or could be interpreted as a call to action or work. So what is it? Is it works or is it not works? You would think that James would have been familiar with Jesus' teachings, right? So his comment that we should be doers and not just hearers of the word there, an inference to Jesus, John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was flesh, blah, blah, blah. That's an inference to Jesus right there. There's got to be an associative meaning. Here's James building on Jesus' teaching about hearing and doing. James relates that action is intended. We are not called to be spiritual bench warmers. We're called to get into the game. But can't you just hear the Paul camp kind of retorting? Yeah, but not just with lippy, heartless submission over there. Not just some sort of submission to mandates. Jesus said, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. What were Jesus' commandments? Jesus did say that all the commandments could be summarized as two things: loving God and loving others. Jesus also said at the Last Supper, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another." So you've got two focuses here, or foci. You've got God being Lord, lordship, and the second being inclusivity. God is the Lord of our entire lives. Not just these little fragments that we compartmentalize conveniently. Like, I don't know, Sunday afternoon from 5 to 6:30. God is God of all of our actions, our thoughts, our deeds, even our business practices, our tax returns, our relationships, our entertainment choices. And inclusion into community means everyone, irrespective of socioeconomic status, how much you've got in your bank account, what subdivision you live in, what your race, religion, sexuality, everyone's included. Sounds to me like those are practical applications. Actions aren't salvific, but they are responsive. What if our behavior isn't a requirement, but a response? What if it's a response? That seems more authentic, doesn't it? I'm not required to love my family. My response to loving them is, and being in relationship to them, affects my actions. So what if our actions were responsive? Whoa, that's a game changer. You see, as we are transformed, we become more like Christ. Our desires, our motivations, and our objectives are all molded into the same ones as Christ's. It is a product of our pursuit. We become in our thinking. Soon our aspirations are like Christ's. Kingdom work becomes our priority. The point was never that God would have some controlling measure of our lives by giving you some sort of work or assignment, or that God was looking for some sort of cheap labor force. That was never the point. Kingdom work is your opportunity to apply your specifically designed gifts to intentionally assigned roles, so that you might experience the fullness and joy that only comes from being on track spiritually. Frederick Buechner said, "Your calling in life is where the world's greatest need intersects your greatest desire." That's not accidental. You didn't just stumble onto that. "Oh, I think I'll be in the Peace Corps." You're given that desire. But not only that, you're given the gifts, the tools you need to accomplish that very task. And it's right there, only there, that you can achieve the fulfillment and the joy and the peace and the happiness and the contentment that you desire. You long for it and cannot achieve it otherwise. It occurs as Christ happens to you individually and corporately within community. It's unsurpassed by any other quest. Psalm 127 says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the labor is in vain." Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, read that book at your own careful consideration, because it will absolutely charge you, convict you. Dietrich Bonhoeffer says the following about the work. Their work is to be Christ's work, Bonhoeffer says, and therefore they are absolutely dependent on the will of Jesus. It is not their own work that they are doing, but it's God's work in Honduras. Across the street, at the grocery store, your workplace, the soccer fields, while you're driving on 565. It's God's work that you're doing. Bonhoeffer, a giant of our faith, very evangelical as one might understand in his context. He alludes that the work is a great privilege, but it's also a difficult undertaking. It's a load to bear. Yet in it and through it, we are changed. And this isn't just faking it until you make it. It's part of your purifying process. It's how you are cured. So, good Labor Day to us all. Amen.